Alright, so we're back with the loanable funds market. We had a video before explaining the basics of it, so if you haven't seen that, I would watch that first. But right now we're going to do some shifts of the loanable funds curves. Alright, so let's say that the government passes a new law that basically creates a tax incentive for firms to invest, like increase their investment with new infrastructure or machines, something like that. So what's going to happen? The firms are going to be more likely to invest, which means that they're going to need more loanable funds to fund that investment, and so demand for loanable funds is going to increase. And then what happens because of that, similar to just the normal goods market, the quantity increases and the price, which in this case is the interest rate, increases. So as a result of this tax incentive that incentivizes firms to invest more, demand for loanable funds goes up, which causes the quantity of loanable funds to go up and the price for loanable funds to go up. And why that makes sense, higher price is a higher interest rate. The suppliers are going to want to supply more because they can get a higher price on it, basically. So that's what happens when demand shifts up. Alright, so let's look at it the other way. So instead of an incentive for, a tax incentive for investment, let's say that they put a tax on investment. So firms are going to want to invest less, and so just like before, it's going to affect demand, and in this case it's going to go down because they're going to want to invest less. There's going to be less demand for loanable funds because they don't need it to fund their investment. Anyways, demand goes down. So what happens because of that? So we were here at this interest rate and this quantity. So demand shifts down. The quantity of loanable funds decreases. And the interest rate or the price for loanable funds decreases as well. So that makes sense because there's a lower interest rate. The lenders are getting less money back for the loans, so they're not going to want to loan out as much, so quantity decreases. So when demand changes, so demand for loanable funds increases, what happens? Quantity of loanable funds increases, and the real interest rate, the price of loanable funds, increases. And when demand decreases, the quantity of loanable funds decreases, and the real interest rate, the price of loanable funds, decreases. So let's say the government passes a new law that incentivizes people who save. Let's say there's tax benefits if you save more, something like that. So what's going to happen there is people are going to want to save more, and since the supply is determined by national savings, what that's going to do is increase private savings, which will increase the supply for loanable funds curve. So it's going to increase, and let's see what happens. So we were here. The quantity of loanable funds goes up, which makes sense because there's more money that's being saved. And the price, the real interest rate, goes down. So when supply increases, there's more loanable funds in the market. You could think of it that way. The price goes down because there's more, they'd be willing to take a lower price for it. And the quantity goes up because there's a lower price, more people are going to want it. Alright, so let's look at another example for supply. So like we covered in the last video, the supply of loanable funds is national savings, which is private savings plus public savings. So the one we looked at before was private savings. People wanted to save more and increase the supply. So now let's look what happens with public savings. So this will be a common question, I think. So let's say the government is running a surplus. So they have more money, or they're spending less money than they're taking in. They have money left over. That's going to increase public savings, which is going to, just like the increase in private savings, increase the supply for loanable funds. It's going to increase the quantity just like before and decrease the interest rate. So now let's look and see what happens when there's a government deficit, which means that public savings is negative. So let's just assume, for the sake of this argument, that there is a balanced budget in the equilibrium here in this first case. So now they start running a deficit, there's negative money in public savings, which is going to decrease national savings. And so the supply for loanable funds is going to decrease because there's less money in the market that's available for loaning. The interest rate, the real interest rate, the price for loanable funds goes up because there's less of it in the market. It's at a premium, they're going to have to charge a higher price for it. And the quantity demanded of loanable funds goes down because of the higher price. people are going to want to demand less of it, essentially. So that's what happens with the government, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. So let's look and see what happens as a review when supply of loanable funds changes. So let's say it increases. What happens? Quantity of loanable funds increases, and the real interest rate, the price of loanable funds, decreases. Similarly, when loanable funds supply decreases, the quantity of loanable funds in the market decreases, and the real interest rate, the price of loanable funds, increases. Alright, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense and you understand how these curves shift, what causes them to shift, and what happens when they do shift. If you don't completely understand it, leave a comment in the YouTube page. If we miss something, we'll try and reconcile that. And in the future, we're going to be going over some more loanable fund stuff and see what happens in an open economy, because this is closed. So we'll see how allowing foreign investment and savings changes things. So stay tuned for that, and thank you.